Hi, all. It is another Dialogue Options, and we've got another roundtable of sorts, mini roundtable. I'm joined by two people from People for the Enforcement of Rape Laws. You will remember Meaghan Ybos from a previous Dialogue Options. She's joined today by Heather Marlowe, and we're talking about a story from Texas where the government there has now passed a bill about to approve the crowdfunding of money to test untested rape kits, to end a so-called backlog that, if you watch the last interview I did with Meaghan, is not a backlog at all. Ladies, welcome. I'll start with Heather, because Heather is the new guest. Tell me a bit more about this bill, this issue, and where your organization and you personally stand on it.
Thanks so much for having us, Liana. So this bill is, I believe it just passed in Texas, and it is by Victoria Neve, I believe is her name. And she, it's Bill HB 1729, and it's allowing driver's license applicants the option to donate like $1 here or there when they go to register towards testing of rape kits. And I'll let Meaghan take over. That's like where the bill that's the nature of the bill. And then Meaghan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Meaghan, how much money reasonably are they talking here? Do they expect to raise? Do you guys know?
I don't even see where that has been reported.
Yeah, that is something that I feel is missing in this legislation. Is we don't know how much. They said they're looking to raise about $4 million in funding to test rape kits. Now, I don't know what the population is we're talking about here. We can look up the population of Texas, but how many people drive and how many people are adults? What's your position on this bill? Because I can see, like, the one side, oh, it's great, it's volunteerism, it's on the surface an easy way to solve the problem. On the other side, at least where I'm looking at this, there's the issue of, well, this is treating, again, sexual assault as a different sort of crime, and this is making the testing of these untested kits that have mainly been untested due to neglect a nice to have instead of a government priority. So where do you guys stand?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, Meaghan.
We are opposed to this legislation, as well as any kind of measures that treat rape as a problem that charity should fix. We fundamentally disagree with any kind of measures that cast rape in a different light from other kinds of violent crime. And since we don't have government trying to raise charity dollars for other crimes, we just oppose this legislation just on that basis alone.
Yeah, it seems odd. Do you see this, because I mean, you blew my mind last time, Meaghan. Do you guys see this as something that is well-meaning but misguided, or is there something more going on here? We'll go to Meaghan first, then Heather.
On the surface, you might think that these people mean well, but it's hard for me to believe that when there are nonprofit interests at stake. And these programs create additional administrative bureaucracies that people have to be paid to work. And so I don't view this as something that is just purely looking out for victims. And, I think it creates an extremely dangerous precedent.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's next, right?
Yeah.
Crowdfunding
Right, like what's next, indeed. And then like crowdfunding for the prosecution. And then if you look in Detroit, that's what they're doing. So they like took it to the next step. And then I'm asking, like, are they going to be crowdfunding for the costs of incarceration, like after these rapists get convicted? Or like, are they just going to be billing the victims maybe for the costs? Like, I don't know. I'm on this one Texas Tribune article. Should I put the link in?
It's probably the same one I've got here about Texas has Facts crowdfunding menu. Yeah, I can. Oh, the past one. Yeah, put the link up.
Okay. So the representative Victoria Neve is talking about, like, I wish this was an issue that we didn't even have to talk about today. And then another legislator like joins in, and he's quoted in here. He says, Representative Joe Moody, a Democrat from El Paso, who's chairman of the House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence. Oh, sorry, wait, this is the wrong quote. State Representative Terry Canales, a Democrat from Edinburgh, it says he suggested taking things one step further. Why not give individuals who are sexually assaulted the option of paying to have their own rape kit instead of letting family or friends help out?
Yeah.
And he's saying, he says, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would say, you know what, I'll pay for it.
Yeah, this seems quite like condescending.
Very condescending.
Okay, so it's not just me. Heather, how, as somebody who's an advocate, somebody who's directly affected by this, how does this sort of stuff make you feel?
Well, I mean, I live in California, and there has been, you know, a lot of, I would say, in terms of like funding of your, like having to crowdfund either personally or via these, you know, alternative, you know, charity legislation, basically, it's like a slap in the face, basically, because like you guys, the general theme of like, well, then is this actually like, what kind of crime is this? You know, is this actually a crime? And to add on to what Meaghan was saying about how we are fundamentally opposed to this, what further makes the issue, this crowdfunding for justice issue, murkier is that you see in a lot of, there are several organizations and nonprofits that also are, you know, claim to be advocates for ending the backlog, the fake backlog. And they have actually partnered in cities to encourage this crowdfunding model. And I find that as an advocate for, you know, the enforcement of rape laws, which should include, you know, funding, you know, the investigation, which includes testing evidence, which includes, you know, processing evidence. I find that these organizations encouraging crowdfunding or partnering with groups that are wanting to do, or legislators that are wanting to do crowdfunding, to be really disconcerting, and it misleads the public as well.
How's that? How does it mislead the public? Well,
it misleads the public because it's creating these groups, one of them being Joyful Heart Organization, and their sister organization, and the Backlog, because they have so much PR power and backing. They control this narrative, and so to be an advocate for victims on the one hand, and then encouraging the crowdfunding of this crime, that's a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could I add something to that also?
Sure thing, yeah.
Like, I view it as a conflict of interest too, but I also just view it again as condescending, and just, uncaring and demeaning towards rape victims, to view them as an object of charity, that you know, their violations at the hands of predators and the government can be fixed with a donation. But like in the cities that are really going forward with these charity models, like Detroit is only the latest, or Texas is only the latest, but like Detroit seems to be the trail burner in this trend. And Detroit has huge issues when it comes to the police department and neglecting rape evidence. They're second only to Memphis in the largest amount of untested rape kits. Mm-hmm. And just anyone who with any cursory knowledge of what's been happening in Detroit over the past few years can see that there are large structural political problems there that are not going to be fixed with charity donations, whether it's for rape or not. So like when these advocacy organizations that claim to be anti-rape are advocating for these infusions of cash that just prop up these failing systems, it is a slap in the face, like Heather said.
And I'll add to that too, with Detroit, again, being the trailblazing charity model, it's already been shown that it doesn't work, because it's the time that they announced their, what was it, close to 13,000 untested kits found
like
in it.
Over 11,000.
Yeah, more than 11,000. I've got it up here.
Over 11,000 since that. And then the country has, you know, people have been, the city has been flooded with donations. Sheryl Sandberg has donated. Erykah Badu did like a charity concert, and the NFL players are getting involved.
Yeah.
They've raised millions of dollars. And since that time, a second backlog has developed. And so there's like thanks to like the, you know, the actual investigative journalists they found another 500 untested kits that have been, you know, neglected from 2009, whenever this came to, is that when it came to light? Yeah.
Like rape kits collected since 2009.
So
yeah, there was a second thing recently. They found another, it says 555, just like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
They just found it in storage.
Yeah.
Yes. So
yeah, they just found it.
Yeah. Like finding change in your sofa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that goes to show
like a chain of custody policy, or anyway.
Now, is there an element of rape myth going on here? Because this whole thing about, oh, pay to have your own rape kit tested. My first thought is, you know, based on the statistics, especially in places like Detroit, where it's a poverty problem as much as anything, the women being affected don't have $2,000 lying around. Their families don't have $2,000 lying around. But the face of this issue through the Joyful Heart Foundation is, you know, thanks to shows like Law and Order Special Victims Unit, are rich white women living in fancy Manhattan, you know, studio apartments that are beautiful and it's pretty and there's a glamour surrounding it. And with this celebrity face being put on the whole thing now, I think that compounds the problem. Do you think that part of this myth that we're dealing with, because of the way regular people, I don't say regular people not directly affected by this issue have been exposed to this issue, do you think that we need a massive amount of public re-education? I'll throw it to Heather first, then Meaghan, you can chime in.
You asked if we need
what kind of, let me rephrase, because it was 2 yes or no. What kind of public education do you see is needed to start confronting the misperceptions that seem to be underlying this approach?
I guess, I mean, you make a great, you know, point about, I mean, it's very dangerous that Mariska Hargitay is leading this movement, because it's conflating, you know, real life with fantasy, basically. And you know, she goes so far as to, you know, show up to these press conferences with prosecutors like in New York and in Detroit, like dressed up in her SVU costume.
Really?
Yes. And so, you know, the general public is seeing like a conflation of her as Olivia Benson, where every kid is tested and every, you know, victim receives justice. And I find that to be really dangerous. But, you know, that show is what on it's one of the most successful TV shows. It's on what, like its 17th or 18th year with no chance of going anywhere. They rip stuff from the headlines and they, you know, they rewrite it so that in the end, you know, you leave with this great feeling that justice is being served. And it's really, really quite far from that. And I've only read a handful of articles of people who have, you know, who have taken apart, you know, the what am I trying to say? Just the absurd
fantasy, yeah,
the absurdity of what that is. I mean, I'll let Meaghan, if you want to.
Yeah, like I have a lot to add on to that.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a huge cognitive bias because of the way the media has covered this, and compounded by the SVU element that, and then like you even have like Joe Biden like talking about fantasy and fiction conflating. Joe Biden guest starring on the show as himself to talk about his work with Mariska Hargitay to end the backlog. Like Heather and I find in our work like a huge barrier when we try to explain this issue to people, because SVU and the mainstream media has already gotten to them, and then they have a confirmation bias and they will actually not believe what we're saying. And like on the internet too, we also get like Law and Order fans who get angry when you criticize Mariska. And so you have people on there who are obsessed with this show and think it's real, and then will go so far as to attack anyone that stands in the way of their fantasy. So like we have it from all levels. Like we have the popular culture, we have the media, we have the politicians, the advocacy. So like in terms of re-educating the public, I don't even like where do you even start?
Well, that's the big question, right? I mean, this sounds like cultivation theory in action. It's the unique power of television to mainstream the opinions that people see on TV. Like this is a documented phenomenon. Sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Oh, just it is the way that they have, I mean, this might, I don't think this is a stretch, but the concert of advocacy, like Meaghan said, politicians and the federal government to, I believe, revise this kind of crisis going on, has been so successful. It is a massive,
so successful. And the people, like the communications director of Joyful Heart is a former communications person of the DOJ.
Wow.
And she now,
the crisis of untested rape kits largely does fall on the DOJ because of their failed grant programs that no one wants to talk about. So you have someone whose job was to defend that moving into this advocacy role.
Now that grant program you're talking about, we talked about that last time. It was the unaccountable block grant program that the funds were not actually going to the untested, the testing of the kits. It was office furniture and staff and all that stuff. Is that correct?
Yes. And the law was named after a rape victim, and the media still talks about it like it's solving problems.
Because people want the problems to be solved. Do you think an element of this is that this is a crime that is treated as a fate worse than death? and because of it, there is a stigma even talking about it. Have you encountered this at all, either of you? Heather, go ahead.
I see that more among older people, like self-described advocates, like the one that Debbie Smith, who the federal legislation is named after. I think that she and the law supporters like use that as a way to prevent you from criticizing the law. And like I've heard accounts of her like crying when media criticizes the efficacy of the law, just manipulative things like that. What do you think?
Well, yeah, Heather, what are your just like personal relationship with this whole thing? When you try to talk about it, do you feel like this wall goes up?
You know, I'm at colleges right now and have been. My experiences were kind of put together in a solo play, and so I talk mostly and educate mostly to college age students, and it's a mixed response. It's a whole different kind of group of students who, because I think on college campuses, a lot of times the perpetrator is known to them. So they find that what happened to me and the fact that a lot of these untested rape kits are from stranger rape, they find that to be shocking. And they also, a lot of times, because I am working with feminist groups, they there's almost like a, I don't know, like I think what you're saying, like the rape myth thing, like, oh, it's such a horrible thing. How could, like, it's almost not possible that could happen. But on the other end, like on the flip side of the coin, they do understand, like police, they do have a distrust of police, and they do understand, like through, I think maybe perhaps the Black Lives Matter movement, before it became what it is now, but it seems like there is an understanding of how police departments operate, and that that this crime would not want, that it's deprioritized because of, you know, priorities that police departments do put on, you know, like war on drugs, civil forfeiture, creating more money for themselves. So it takes a little bit of like explaining to the students that, like, yes, outside of the college environment, this is existing in the real world. There are stranger rapists that go on to like continue to rape and rape with impunity. It takes a little bit of explaining to them, but overall I think that I'm not falling on deaf ears.
That's good. It's interesting because your experiences bring up an entirely different set of rape myths. You've got the mainstream media rape myth where the cops are your friends and they always catch the bad guy, and oh, sometimes the courts can't convict, but everybody cares. Mm-hmm. Now you've got this college campus thing that, yeah, it's predominantly acquaintance rape, date rape, that kind of stuff. It's not you don't need a rape kit in those cases. There's no question that there was sex. It's whether that sex, it's a completely different issue. And I think that because there's been such media attention for that sort of issue, it's gotten
massive.
So big. Yeah, the issue has actually been overstated there in terms of statistics, that you guys are kind of getting shoved out because you're not just dealing with the celebrity quotient with this, you know, backlog. I think it's more just negligence. Let's call it what it is. It's a disinterest in actually testing the kits that they collect. And I think that's personally, to get on a soapbox here, that's a form of second violation. that they put you guys through hours and hours and hours of collection, and then they don't have the respect to test the, pardon my language, effing kit.
Right. It's just criminal evidence that they're not processing. It's nothing special. And
but then why take the kit in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, it's a violation of informed consent. If I didn't think they were going to do anything with the evidence I gave them, like, I wouldn't have. I mean, that being said, my rapist was caught 9 years later, but I don't.
Just to put it in really simple terms, to me, if I found out, say I was going for my, yearly physical every, with my doctor, and then I found out they weren't actually testing the blood sample,
right,
I'd be furious. But people go,
more appropriately, like if you're in a life or death situation and you go to the doctor.
And just to add on to that too, I mean, there is even another layer of negligence that can go on. I'll speak just specifically from dealing with the San Francisco Police Department after, like, through my play and then through the local media, it became known that there were several thousand untested kits. Now, then they went on to test those kits in a private lab, and 97% of those kits came back with usable evidence, right? My kit was tested at San Francisco Police Department, and it is only partially usable because of quote unquote DNA irregularities. And in I think 2014, the San Francisco Crime Lab also, through investigative journalism, it was found out that, that there was additional hundreds of sexual assault kit or sexual rape evidence, basically, that also had quote unquote DNA irregularities. And so, the level of negligence can just keep going, and that's like a secondary or a tertiary, like.
Now, DNA irregularities, does that mean there's more than one bit of DNA in the sample, or does that mean a contaminated testing process?
It's, they have been so closed about it. There was a civil grand jury report that asked that the San Francisco Police Department no longer be overseen, the crime lab no longer be overseen by the SFPD, and they've decided to continue to remain in jurisdiction of that crime lab. So it's very closed as to what exactly was going on there. But
could I jump in? From media reports that I remember of the crime lab, the latest SFPD's crime lab scandal, is that the irregularities meant that all of the evidence with irregularities could be compromised in its usefulness as evidence. So, while they didn't say what the irregularities were, I think it's safe to say that the samples were contaminated, because even if they're contaminated from the wrong forensic collection procedures, or contaminated from a technician who was on drugs, or has 100% failure rate with her compliance, you can't use that evidence.
So they're basically saying that our processes are so sloppy, any good defense attorney could get this thrown out of court.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you guys, I think we sort of identified. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I just want to say, where we are at in this day and age with technology, or with DNA, is when you have a rape kit done, and if you have it done within, Meaghan, what would you say, 24 hours?
Yeah. Assuming you don't shower or anything.
Yeah, it is very easy to extract from your body, from the victim's body, a usable sample. And even if it is, for instance, there is enough technology now that you can recreate the DNA so that the chains are saying this correctly.
They make copies of it, so it doesn't matter how small the sample is. So you can get a DNA profile from a much smaller sample than.
You're talking about, what is it, the PCI process or something like that? Polycarbon, yeah, polycarbon, PCR, polycarbon replication, yeah.
So just, and sorry, to finish off that, the San Francisco Police Department, they are now being required to report the number of sexual assaults that they take every every quarter, how many of those sexual assaults had a rape kit, and then how many of those rape kits there was a usable sample. And yet, here they are with all of the technology, tons of funding, and yet somehow still only less than half of those kits are being uploadable into CODIS. So, it goes back to this theme of of negligence and arguably, indifference.
Now let's take this to a completely human level, because we're getting into sort of the criminal justice world, which is a brutal, unforgiving, miserable, nobody wins arena. Right. How important is it for someone who has experienced stranger rape, and I'm avoiding words like victim or survivor or anything like that, for the purposes of closure, for you guys to move on as whole human beings who have, surprise, surprise, lives beyond this event? How important is it for you to have a name and possibly, an identity, to know for certain who even if they never see a day in jail, who this guy is? How important is that to know?
Well, I guess I'll go first, because I have had that occur.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe in the concept of closure. I don't think that you're ever going to be a whole person after trauma. I mean, even just one trauma it will have an effect on the rest of your life. Like for me, though, it was just a pragmatic benefit to have my rape kit tested, because my rapist was a stranger and he was on the loose until they tested the evidence in his cases. And so I didn't know what he looked like. He knew what I looked like because he had stalked me and attacked me in my home, but I couldn't protect myself. So I was a sitting duck the whole time. So it's not a matter of closure for me or healing. I'm not healed, but I am actually safer now.
Right. So that's what it is. It's just the feeling like you can do something about this.
Yeah. It's just a survival, I don't know, a survival advantage to know who my anonymous rapist was.
It's regaining control.
Yeah.
And that's a known step in trauma recovery.
Yeah, and even if he hadn't been prosecuted, just knowing who it was, so I would be able to go run away if I ever saw him anywhere.
Oh wow, it was that base.
Yeah, I didn't know what he looked like when he attacked me. The first time I saw him was in court.
Jeez. So it's almost like they're treating this as we can't get a conviction, so don't test the thing. They're not recognizing that, again, from a public health perspective, restorative justice perspective, there is benefit to testing these kits.
Just as a public safety perspective.
Yeah, public safety. Okay, that's a completely different thing as well. Yeah, I mean, Heather, what are your thoughts on this? Why is it important that these details exist, even if you have to get it done at a private lab, even if it never sees a day in court?
I mean, I also have no idea of the face of the person who did this to me. I was drugged, and to me, having the kit tested would have meant that at least this person who did this to me, his DNA is in our criminal data bank system, so that if he offends, there will be, and the person reports, or if he commits a lesser crime and his DNA is taken from him, there is a chance, like just a shred of a chance that that I will be notified, or I will find out who this person was. Like Meaghan said, even if he wasn't prosecuted, at least I could see a face. I mean, it's a very it's a very intimate violation. It's the most intimate violation I think that you can have, and to have zero, like, it just exists as this nothingness to me. And so to learn that I did everything correct in reporting and getting the rape kit done, and then to find out that there were, DNA irregularities, and then that there is nothing that in the chain of custody, there's nothing the San Francisco Police Department can do to go back and retest my kit, or to have my kit privately tested somewhere else. Like, you talk about, wanting to fundraise to get your kits tested in outside labs. That's no longer, I'm no longer allowed to do that. So I likely will never have anything. I will likely have nothing, and just have to, move on with my life, which obviously I have in some ways, and I haven't in a lot of other ways.
To cope, do you imagine that face that you're never gonna know what it like? Is there a placeholder perpetrator in your head?
Kind of, yeah, because there are some foggy kind of,
Yeah, because the brain has to fill that space. Like, that's got to be a completely,
yeah, the level of dissonance that goes on.
That's the word I was looking
for. It's like torture. I remember, before my rapist was caught, it was just like he was more than just a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had never seen a human in connection with this, so it became more. And finally seeing him in court, I was like, he is just a pathetic person. Like, he's just a person. But in my mind, he was the whole world, because I never saw the person.
Mm-hmm. Now, the reason, and I want to pivot a little bit away from the deeply personal here, because you guys are sharing a lot, and I really appreciate it. I know when to back off. I'm not that.
Oh, no,
but I have a soul. The narrative thing, I want to get back. We talked a lot with Meaghan's original interview about the police narrative and how you guys demolished that. And that is essentially, the cops care, but they're just overburdened. Our law enforcement departments are playing victim, essentially, which is kind of a scary thought, because if they're not on this, who is? Yes, budgets are issues. I have friends that are cops. I love them dearly, and I hear about some of the troubles they face. But you guys, every time I talk to you guys, it sounds like there's just this apathy going on. But I want to pivot to the college campus thing again, because this is something we didn't get to touch on with Meaghan for time. And Heather, you have some direct experiences. And I want to go back to your comment you made that, they seem just, they don't know what to do, because their narrative is that, they throw percentages and the number of, most people know they're rapist and all this stuff. And that's, that's where you get into these he said, she said mechanics and accusations. Oh, you're ruining this young man's life. And you guys come in. Do you feel like there is is it just that statistics have become gospel to these students and these student advocates, or is it something more than that? Is it almost like a competitive thing that because there is no doubt what happened to you, there's almost an insecurity there? I'll start with Heather, and then we'll go to Meaghan.
Isn't that a good question?
Yeah.
Only Leanna would ask such a good question. Like, no one asks us intelligent questions.
Yes, thank you so much.
Wow. The mean girling of rape culture. I can't believe we're here. But
and, rape envy is a thing.
Oh my God, it's true. So it is a thing. Yeah, it is and the fact that, you know, Heather, your immediate reaction was you just started laughing.
Well, I mean, I'll just take an example of just a college that I was at. I'm not going to say names, but, you know, I sat with a group of, you know, 18 to 20-year-olds, and I asked them what got them involved in this issue of sexual assault awareness. And all of them had, they all had some sort of brush up with the issue. But what struck me was this one woman said, you know, well, you know, I was in a relationship. The guy wasn't that great. Like, we had some arguments here and there. And then she goes, but then I took a women's and gender study class, and I learned about the patriarchy. And I learned about, I learned about, you know, like, rape culture. We studied Andrea Dworkin. And,
oh no.
And she goes, and then, you know, everything made sense to me. The whole world made sense to me. And I'm sitting there thinking about Andrea Dworkin, and some of the quotes that she said were basically any interaction with a man that's sexual can be considered rape. And, you know, that creates a red flag. I mean, that gave me a red flag. And so then they all went on to share, you know, that they either knew somebody or themselves had been affected by or a victim of acquaintance rape. And then, you know, I tried to explain to them that, you know, with untested rape kits, that a large percentage of these untested kits are stranger rape. And that's where I felt like I fell on deaf ears, or like a little bit just like glossing over, well, that doesn't, we don't learn that happens. We don't learn that happens.
Yeah, like, rape isn't about a man jumping out of a bush.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah, it's like you have to get your entire argument on a piece of Bristol board so you can hold it up at a protest or it doesn't count. It's this catchphrase advocacy that just, oh, I'll put on a pink hat with cat ears and all of a sudden I'm an advocate. It's, you know, that's...
I want to add one more thing. In booking my shows at college campuses, a lot of times I deal with Title IX coordinators, and I receive a lot of, like, I have gotten so much saying like, oh, well, untested rape kits aren't a problem. Stranger rape isn't a problem at our school. Therefore, you know, like, we don't have that problem here. So this isn't really an issue that is going to benefit our students. And I'm like, hey, well, your students are going to go into the real world at some point.
They're saying that because it's an issue that doesn't affect children privileged enough to go to college. I shouldn't say children, they're young adults at this point, but you can afford to go to college. They're saying it isn't something that the student body should learn about because it isn't directly related to narcissism.
I guess because Title IX thinks that they have a monopoly on rape, any discussion of rape in a school setting. But like,
that's making that's making rape an educational accessibility issue instead of, again, it just being something that's outright wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like they have to consider their narrative, and like they feel threatened by it.
They don't.
Like, they really do feel threatened. Like, I have talked to people who are involved in anti-campus rape advocacy, and like they resent any discussion of stranger rape. Because, and like, I agree that if your conversation is going to be about campus or about like sexual violations that occur on college campuses, which are mostly not stranger rapes, and like talk about the violation of consent and other things and taking advantage of people, like, yeah, I guess like if I were to talk about my stranger rape, that probably wouldn't fit into that conversation. But but these advocates, like the campus rape faction of anti-rape advocacy, feels extremely threatened by the issue of stranger rape, and so they'll shut out us. And then also they've started to co-opt the issue of untested rape kits to support their argument. So they say police shouldn't handle rape cases. I actually saw like a headline recently, I think it was in Huffington Post, that said police, when it comes to sexual assaults on campus, we cannot leave it up to the police.
Yeah, that is the other thing that sort of demolishes.
And then they tie in untested rape kits to back up their assertion, which I agree with, that police handle rape poorly.
Yeah, but that doesn't ergo they shouldn't handle it. It's ergo they should handle it better. God damn it!
Right.
Yes, and instead of that, they are advocating to have all of this go through, the kangaroo courts. And I, have heard the nightmares also be on college campuses. I've heard the nightmares from the students. I was just at University of Richmond, and their Title IX coordinator, both of them were a husband and a wife that were handling these assaults. So it's like, okay, so you guys don't want to advocate to have the police handle this, which we know is a bad job, but instead you want to create or you want this crime to be handled by an even more crapshoot of a system. And
then again, like casting it as a para crime, like a para criminal offense, not an actual crime.
Yeah, it really sounds a lot like that scene in Mean Girls. We're the plastics, so we all wear pink on Wednesdays.
Yes.
You're not allowed to wear pink on Wednesdays because only the plastics can wear pink on Wednesdays. This is what it sounds like. Like we're dealing with campus rape on Wednesdays. We can't deal with stranger rape on Wednesdays. Like they can only do one thing at a time because it's the dork side clique.
Right.
Yeah, and then one other thing too is that there was a college in Boston that recently I was supposed to talk at, but then supposed to perform and talk at, and then they got back to me and they said, oh, sorry, like we've decided that instead of your talk, we're going to have the Boston Police Department come in and talk about rape kits. Which, obviously they are going to give like a glowing report of how
the law and order narrative.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is why your guys are getting a hearing from my particular audience, because, gamers had a particular experience with Law and Order Special Victims Units. So sort of, it seems like if you're anybody but sort of that very safe sit at home and watch TV audience, you think that show is ridiculous because every community.
I thought so.
Yeah. Like,
I didn't know that so many people took it seriously, but they do.
Well, I think that it just gives people a false perspective, even that cops are going to spend that much time on your case.
Yes.
That is not the reality.
Or that the cop fundamentally wants to investigate your case.
Well, they probably do, but they've got 25 other cases as well, especially in a sex crimes unit where that's all they handle. I mean, it's not that. And I think that it's really setting people up to have an exceptionally lonely experience because they expect Olivia Benson to show up with her kid on her hip and her nepotistic departmental relationship. And together, this cop family will superhero solve all your issues.
Yeah, and Joe Biden cares about you, and
as well as every other cause that he cares about. Cancer, he cares about this, he cares about that, and I mean,
but like speaking of charity again, like lucky us. Joe Biden just started a foundation called the Biden Foundation, and one of their program areas is going to be giving grants to process rape kits.
Right. And I mean, the other side will say, why do you care as long as it gets done? Yeah. And I can answer that question for myself, but I'd like you guys to answer that question because this is setting a precedent. Yes. It is setting the idea that this is something we should do, just like food banks. You know, poverty and hunger is seen as something we can't solve. So we have to band-aid it at Easter and Christmas and think you've done your part.
Yeah, and then feel good about that.
Right. And it is a question of feeling good. How can this be something that makes the rest of us feel good instead of something that makes us feel kind of oddly awful that we haven't had to experience this? You know, what are the pitfalls of this approach becoming enshrined in law? Not a top up, not a private sector thing, while still having an acknowledgement the public sector is screwing up and needs to do better. In your words, Meaghan, we'll go to you first. What is the pitfall of this approach?
Okay, so other than like a philosophical, cultural impact of casting rape as less than a crime, there is the fact that these charitable interventions do not fix the problems at all. They just infuse money into these departments with the same people who have the same priorities as before, and they're going to keep doing the same thing, like in Detroit with the second backlog.
Well, and it sounds like it's beyond backlog now. It's the kits are not ready for court.
Right. Yeah. So and then that proliferates all over the country. And then at the same time, police departments are still going to pay more attention to drug cases and cases that they can generate revenue off of. So, and then there's still going to be the political priorities of each individual community. So if that community doesn't want to take rape seriously, a grant from the Biden Foundation or from a driver's license applicant from the state of Texas is not going to change any of that. And arguably, in my opinion, it actually extends those problems because it props up the bad actors.
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever hear a suggestion that we should crowdfund murder investigations.
No, and then like, would we be okay with it? That's the more disturbing thing, is that so many people are okay with this.
Yeah. Heather, do you have anything to add?
Not really. Just the fact that, or just wanting to add that, you know, like this idea of charity towards victims, you know, this is nothing new. You know, it's, I mean, I don't know the long history of charity towards victims, but it really seems to have reached, with this crowdfunding for justice, it seems like this is a peak. I mean, I don't know.
Do you think this is because the face of a rape survivor or rape victim is female, that you don't think we need charity for a guy who gets beat up in a bar fight? You know, two guys held him down and beat him up. We see that in movies all the time, and that scene is tough.
Right.
You know, whereas there's this paternalism that kicks in. Do you think that's because it's not exclusively men do get sexually assaulted, but primarily a crime that affects women?
Meaghan?
I mean, I don't know. I think the crime is taken less seriously. Like, I don't know if it's because it impacts, but I mean, prison rape is not taken seriously at all, and that mostly impacts men.
Yeah, which any men's advocate will tell you that's a serious condition.
I know, not to sound like that.
Well, no, it's funny because I'm seeing more of that in TV now. I mean, Criminal Minds implied it, but they've always been sort of ahead of the curve in terms of men who are raped. Suits dealt with it a little. Mr. Robot touched on it. It seems like there's this sensitization to it, but yeah, you're absolutely right that I knew stand-ups who did entire bits in their set about prison rape, and it is sort of, and it's done to unman these guys. It's, you know, you're my bitch, and you know, a bitch is a woman who acts like a man, who acts like a woman. You know, I mean, it's that sort of paradigm, but you also
see women, like largely it's women who are pushing these charity measures. So again, I don't know if it's a paternalistic, it's certainly a condescending thing. I mean, it's, it doesn't have to be men doing it to be paternalistic, I guess. It's paternalistic women.
Yeah, it's sort of the role of here is this strong authority figure helping the poor defenseless cream puff,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be seen that way. I mean, what does that do to your self-image, to your sense of self, to be constantly coming up against this societal desire to put you guys back into a playpen? Meaghan, we'll start with you.
I mean, it's just a constant thing. The media is so relentless. It's like rape is trendy now. And it's all the time. Like, especially with regards to rape kits, it's just all getting worse. And you're seeing more of these savior interventions and like the solidification of the pro-police narrative in all forms of conversation. It's just getting worse. I don't know what to say.
Heather, do you have anything to add here?
Oh, wait. Can we also, like, I don't know if this interview is coming to an end, if this is too much of a new thing, but there's a documentary coming out that is, did I tell you about this, Leanna?
I don't think so.
Hargitay produced, and it's about the rape kit backlog and her savior work. So that's coming out when, Heather? It's screening. Like
it's coming out at the Tribeca Film Festival in April 24th through the 28th.
Like, can we like just say what the name is, because it's so absurd? Like the title of the film.
Yeah.
It's called I Am Evidence.
Oh, that's objectification. That's like textbook objectification.
Right.
Textbook. And both Meaghan and I were personally approached by some of the producers of that if you want to talk about objectification, the producer approached me and was like, well, we're considering having your story on this, but the competition is very fierce.
Oh, there's that rape envy phenomenon.
Oh yeah, big time.
You have to be the trendiest. What rape victimology is trendy for fall?
No, but Heather, this woman's name is Trish Adlesic. She's worked with Dick Wolf of Law and Order in the past. But
yeah.
Heather, didn't you talk to her? Because she had reached out to me in a really shady way. She didn't disclose her relationship to Joyful Heart. She reached out as an independent film producer, but I knew what was going on, and then I pieced it together later after talking to Heather. And this woman, didn't you ask her, Heather, about what she was doing in Memphis? And she was like, yeah, we were thinking we wanted to talk to Meaghan, but we don't really think that her case is the story we want to show or something. What did she say?
Because her case didn't happen within county lines, even though
no, it did. It did.
Oh, they said that it didn't, and that and that it because it wasn't within. They're saying because it wasn't within the jurisdiction, because Memphis is one of the Joyful Heart's partners.
Right.
Just partners. But anyway, the overall
no, but she told you that's not we don't think her case is a good fit for our film or something.
The thing that concerns me about this whole setup is there is no separation between the production of a fictional television show and real world advocacy. It almost sounds like the whole thing could be seen as some sort of publicity to give a boost to a long running television show. And how do you get marketing for something that is very, out of the assembly line every single week? It just, and I'm not saying that's necessarily it. It just the optics of it are bad.
And
as a journalist,
that Mariska herself is producing this documentary It also looks like a lot of their advocacy work is staged for their documentary, because they film at all those things.
You know, putting on my journalistic brain right now, it's something that deserves questioning. It's not saying there's anything there. It's just if we don't kick the tires on stuff like this,
right?
Yeah,
we're not doing our jobs.
Yeah,
and I mean,
can I add one more thing, like, that I think you'll be interested in? If you look at the tax filings for Joyful Heart Foundation, they include Law and Order SVU in their description of their advocacy work, because they say that they portray rape narratives and they're changing the culture that way. So they're listing a for-profit enterprise on their 990s. I assume that that's legal because they have, like, they pay people a lot to look at their stuff, but like, you would, I just wish that someone would question that.
But
other than just me and Heather.
If a victim is just evidence, then that removes your right to question. You are a body that is acted on. You're not a participant. Like, that's a ghoulish title.
Yes, it is. It is. The working title was shelved before, and we just found out a few weeks ago that they had changed it mysteriously. I think they did that, like, to well, I don't know. Who knows? Well,
we're going to continue to follow you guys, and I want to talk to you off air about the next chapter of this. But I want to wrap. I'm going to give each of you guys the last word. Because I'm sure you have a lot to say. What is just, you know, that hasn't been talked about yet in this interview? Heather, we'll start, and then Meaghan, we'll go to you.
I guess since the overall theme was, it seemed, well, we kind of went all over the place, but around what the reasons around why, you know, this crowdfunding legislation is so dangerous. I guess I would just, you know, close with saying that people, we already crowdfund through our taxes, you know, so there, like, to be adding on to that versus holding, you know, elected officials accountable for allocating funding towards this crime, and also holding them accountable for how they use the funding that has already been allocated to their jurisdictions for this crime is the direction that this should be going. And yes, it's not easy. It's so much easier to just throw $1 in and feel that, you know, rush of dopamine. You know, I'm making a change. You know, but that's, you know, ultimately, as we are already seeing, not the answer. Yeah, I think that's one other thing is that, you know, in terms of the revisionism of this issue, that is something that Meaghan and I are, like, we feel like it's slipping more and more. Like, every day there are charities that are growing. There's one, and even another one that's even spreading into Canada now that Canada has its quote unquote backlog, that are, you know, coming in again with these sort of, we're going to enact legislation that will basically make everybody feel good, and that it's toothless legislation. And I just would encourage media and investigative journalists to actually, like, sink their teeth in. Just because it's about women and children or women and victims does not make these charities exclusive from being questioned and being their feet held to the fire. And that's, you know, what we're doing personally, but we can only do so much.
We do get attacked by the SVU fandom.
Go ahead, Meaghan. Yeah.
like the SVU fandom is out there, like, and if it's just me and Heather making these arguments, these people say like, you're just bitter because you had a bad experience. I'm sorry you can't be happy for people who are really helping to change things. And so like, I do grant them that they are just seeing me and Heather as two individuals who are complaining about this constantly, and like there's no media on this, there's no other criticism, so like, you know, it's and then the historical record will be flawed.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to have to criticize people you think mean well, but that doesn't mean you don't do it.
Well, it shouldn't.
Yeah, like you have to make sure you're getting the right solution here. We don't want to be like, this is the problem. Since the 1970s, we have not made much of a dent in this issue.
Yeah.
We're going on 50 years or 40 years now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the reforms of the 70s, like the rape shield law reforms, like those all address the trial stage. Like the rapes that we're talking about never reach that stage because the police bury them.
Right.
Yeah. So I know you wanted to close out, so like I'll just.
Oh, you had the last word, so go for it now. Floor's yours.
Like I think that feminists are failing rape victims by not like being out in the streets and protesting the fact that rape is being used as the object of charity. What could be more sexist than that if you view rape as a women's issue?
It's certainly not treating it as it's not treating it as human beings that deserve justice. It's treating it as the unfortunate who we're good if we provide charity. It's a completely different paradigm.
Yeah, it's extremely sexist. I don't want to get into the argument of whether rape affects more men than women, but the popular narrative is that it does. So for feminists not to be protesting this is unforgivable.
That's a place to stop. Mic drop. I got to get my King Bob in for moments like that so he can just go. Meaghan, Heather, thank you so much. This is not the last the viewers will see of you guys, I am sure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your candor. And thank you for answering some pretty tough personal questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liana, for being, so educated and asking questions that we never hear, like complex, thought out questions that we never hear.
We never hear them.
I think maybe because some people are afraid to ask them.
No, remember we talked before about how some journalists a lot of them love rape. Like they love talking about it. Like they love the sort of details.
You could write a whole book on this rape envy concept. I'm telling you, Meaghan, Heather.
I will, hopefully.
As usual, I need to go drink lying down.
Okay.
Thank you so much.